Hello dear students, very good evening to all. So we already discussed about the development of the concept of gatekeeping theory, how the very concept of gatekeeping it came from the very kitchen, and how these psychologists, German American psychologists from the field of psychology, Kurt Lewin, he conducted an experiment under National Research Foundation of the US military during the Second World War, and how he came up with this idea of gatekeeping, and how this term gatekeeping since then has been used in different fields, especially when we are talking about media, and we as the students of media, we need to know that most of the media scholars, they are using this very term gatekeeping, and they are relating this term with the editor of any news outlet, because he is the one who gets to select different kinds of news which will go for the next day. And we also discussed about how after this concept was developed from the field of psychology, how it was experimented in the field of media for the first time in 1950s by a professor of communication in Boston University, David Manning White, and how he tried to find out that who is the actual gatekeeper. And he conducted that experiment in his local area, where he took one local non-metropolitan newspaper, and he found that Mr. Gate there. So we discussed that in today's class. So I'm just you know reminding you people that in this video, what I'm going to discuss, while learning these values, news values, while learning what are the different criteria for selecting news for the next day to get it published, you have to keep in mind the very concept of this gatekeeping theory. And you also have to understand that how this very concept, it has developed from different field, and how it was also experimental in the field of media, and how at the end of White's, David Manning White's experiment on that non-metropolitan newspaper, where he found the Mr. Gate, how he termed the gatekeeper, the editor, the wire service editor, and where he found that the wire service was the main source, the main gate of the information. So all of these efforts that were done during, in the history, all these hint us towards different criteria. What are the different values that needs to be taken into consideration while selecting a news to get it published for the next day. And you should also keep in mind that it's not only about the editor, Mr. Gate, as we discussed in today's class, that there may not be only one editor in within a news outlet. There may be a multiple gatekeepers, as Kurt Lewin says, that there may be multiple sources of information. So these multiple sources of information are multiple gates of information, and in each of these gates you have gatekeepers. So taking all these things into consideration, and keeping it in your mind while going through what we are going to discuss, it will help you to understand more easily about the news values and where it is coming from actually, right? It depends upon the personality of the news editor. It depends upon how even a reporter, when he goes to the field and select a news story, and how he even tries to give an angle to that story. So even whether even there the gatekeeping theory applies or not. So all these things you need to keep in to your mind, and you need to consider all these things while talking about, or while understanding what are the different news values that an editor or anyone takes into consideration while selecting it for the newspaper to get it published the next day. Let's start this video first. So the very first thing that we need to keep in our mind is about the news perspective. What kind of news perspective do you have, right? Or the very concept of this news perspective is the very first and foremost thing that, that ask us that why or what is the very perspective that you have, uh, for which you select this particular story. So in any medium of news, starting from any, say, from the traditional mass media to the digital media, if you look at, you will find there are mainly three factors which really matters when selecting a news, right? So these three factors, they have always influenced anyone who has acted as Mr. Gates, who has acted as, in the position of the gatekeeper. So these three factors have contributed huge to the, to the sense of, or creating a meaning of news perspective among the people, which we most of the time we avoid to understand, and we only look at from the perspective of a reader or a perspective of a viewer. It's obvious that we as a reader, we look at the news content that we want to, that we have interest, or which is our interest area. If you are very much interested in looking at the political stories, you will definitely want that any news outlet will, or they should publish more stories on political issues, right? If you are very much interested in sports, you will very much like to go directly to the sports page, right, to start your morning. So as a reader or as a viewer, you have your own perspective for the news, which is very much related to your interested area. But in when selecting a news within a media outlet, so these people who are selecting the news, they don't only have to keep the readers into their mind. They are struggling so hard to find out the news that can meet the expectation of not only the readers but also of the reporters and the news management, okay, the media management authorities. So when I say that, if I try to put all these into simple words, it is a collective effort of meeting the requirements of everyone while selecting a news. So they will also have to look at the concern and the practice of the reporters, what reporters are concerned about, okay, and how are they practicing over that story, how are they practicing their reporting. So you can't ignore the very practicing quality of a reporter. So that is why I also feel that assigned stories, when a reporter is assigned by his or her editor, whether that reporter has interest over that specific topic to cover or not, because that also matter, you know in that way. If you have interest over sport issues and your editor is asking you to cover an issue on politics, so that may bring question into the very, you can say, the weightage of the information that the reporter brings onto the table, right? So it's also about the reporter's concern about the issues. What do the reporter feel about the issues that are going on, and what is his concern, what he is most concerned about in the society. So we must also look at their concern, what kind of stories they want to cover, and we, in that way, we can give independence to them. In that way, the information that one collects of his own interest area becomes more reliable to the people, right? And it's about reliability. And when you have interest in one particular area, it's very much sure that you will work, you will strive hard to get the very information. You will dig out hard to get the actual information about that issue. So you need to keep in mind that it's not only about the readers or the viewers that news are selected, okay? In order to get the entire perspective of a news value, you must also keep in mind that what are the concerning issues for reporters whom you are sending onto the field, and needs of the public. That's what I already said, that keeping in mind that whether that issue is also concerning issue for the public or not, whether people are also concerned about that, whether people want to know, whether people need to know, right? Rather than want to know, it's about need to know or the right to know about an issue. Along with that, the third factor that matters very much while selecting a news or forming a news perspective is also look at from the perspective of the management, news management. It is about the financial position of any news outlet. So we should not forget that every news organization is a business organization, right? All of them are, most of the news outlets are run by corporations, and they are, they have shares, they have shares, they have shareholders, and who are running these outlets, who are paying the reporters, who are paying the newspapers man, so it's also about the financial perspective, because you have to look at those content that can bring more people to your newspaper stories, or that can bring more audience to your videos, right? So more the people, more the viewership, more the readership, that will increase the television rating points, and that very much makes the difference on the financial aspect, right, of any news outlet. So these are the three factors, and all these three factors matters in every medium of news, whether it is traditional setting of media like newspaper or radio or television, even in internet, right? This social media or the digital news outlet that have come out today, they are also looking, or they are also selecting a news from all these perspectives. So it's very important to get the news perspective right, okay? It's not only about what readers want to read, what viewers want to view. These selection of news are also influenced by the concern and the practices of the reporters, and also the perspective of the news management. Now, so that news perspective was the overall idea of who are the people we must keep in our mind or take into consideration while selecting a news. Now, the second step that we need to understand, and which is the very final stage, is you need to know about what are the different values that we look for, look into the issues that will convert that into news. So in short, what are the different news values? What are the values that make any item, any stories, a value or an item of newsworthy, right? So news value is making judgments about newsworthiness, and it depends on different concepts or on different factors, you can say. So the very first concept that measures the news value is about the impact, and this very much talks about any issue. When you are selecting stories, you keep in your mind that whether that issue has a larger impact upon the society or not, right? You are never going to take an issue which has an impact to a limited effect, right, or to a limited boundary. You want an issue to be selected that can, have impact upon the larger audience. In that way, you can mm, get more readership, you can get more viewership. So this is one of the very concept of news value, how big the impact of that issue is. And most of these, Mr. Gates, they, take this value of impact into consideration while selecting a news. The very second, concept that most of the media professionals who practice selecting the news, they consider is proximity. So this proximity is a concept of, this is a concept of closeness and, you know, closeness and how distant that content is from the people, how close that content is for the people, how close that issue is to the people, and how far that issue is for the people. So by that, I'll just try to explain that in, I'll try to explain it into more meaningful way. So putting this very question that where did the event occur is the very fundamental thing that, anyone who is on the desk selecting for the purpose of selecting news, they will consider it, right? This is the very question. If an editor, you know, of Washington Post sitting in Washington DC on his desk get the news from Athens, and that news is about say a murder, and on the contrary he has another news of murder which is very much from, which is very much from Washington, right, which is very much from the White House, say, for example. So in that case, that reporter has this very, he will have to go through this test of, considering which one has the more value of news, whether he will pick up the murder story of Athens or the murder story of Washington White House, right? So this is where, this concept of proximity comes in. You decide whether the story that you select has an immediate connection to the people or not. If the news outlet is based in Athens, then people, the readerships are more from, it's natural that they will be more from Athens, right? So they will be expecting stories from their own local area, rather than, there may be some stories on national issues, but issues very much local which are much closer to them, they will like them much, or they will like to know about those information much than the information which are, covered from the places which are far away from them, right? So this is the very concept of proximity. And people, or I mean the Mr. Gates and multiple of these Gates, even, right, starting from, the reporter, field reporters, to the news editors, to the copy editors, and to the final editor, Mr. Gate, you'll find that they will always try to look at all these values in order to select the news for the next day, right? Another concept, which can also measure the news value is about timeliness. So how old or how new the issue is, right? So every story, readers or the viewers, they always want the stories which are fresh, right? They don't want stories, if even if that story is related to a very serious incident, in the field of politics or in the field of sports, in the field of science, right? Once that story is gone, that is gone. People just go on, right? People want more. Uh, People want something new, and people want something fresh, right? So this timeliness is about, keeping up with the time. How, how much new stories and how much new angle you can bring into a concept or bring into an issue. Even if the issue is old, if you are successful in bringing up a new angle to that issue, even that will, even that can sell, even that can bring attention of the people, right? So you will find that most of these reporters and, these media professionals, they why they run these scoops, or why they run these sting operations, why they are always coming up with this breaking news. So they are using these terms, breaking news, sting operation, scoops, as a synonymous to, you know new and fresh news. So they are trying to appeal to the people that we have something new for you, come and look at it, come and read it, right? So scoops and sting operations or breaking news are very synonymous to the new and fresh news that the reporters or the news management authority, they try to come up with, right? So the very next day or every week, you'll find that there is a meeting with all the news members in the editor's office, and they will try to, cover one new story, uh, cover story every week, right? So why they come up with that? In order to, uh, get some freshness to the people, to the readers, to the viewers. So this is one of the concept, whether the issue is new, fresh, or it is very old, right? And sometimes what happens, even if you dig up a new angle to an old story, sometimes that, there are very few times that that will work. Most of the time it fails, okay, even if you find a new angle to that. So people get, fatigued, people get tired of, they always want to hear something new. They get tired of the old information. As you will learn in information fatigue, how people get tired of the information because of the overload of the information, right? So even if you try to bring up different angles of one particular issue, people may get tired because it's overload of information on one particular issue, which no reader or viewer will want to keep up with. Okay, this is again one of the concept which uh, Mr. Gate or all those gatekeepers who are there in the gates, right, in the channel of the news and information, in that, journey, or in that line of how news and information get into the gates, you'll find that all these gatekeepers, they also give much importance to the prominence, the quality of prominence of the news. So by prominence we mean, you know news stories which are related, or any incident which is very much related to a figure of, say, who has a good name, who has a good fame in the society. So that will, such kind of stories related to those figures will sell more than any stories which are related to, non respected, not non-respected, but who are not that popular among the people, right? For example, say if there is a murder of a Hollywood actor, that will create more, you know that will attract more readership, that will attract more viewership than if you are covering a story of not that popular figure. If there is a man who was murdered in your neighbor, and you as a reporter, you reported that, whereas there is another reporter in the same outlet where you are working, he reported or she reported a story of a murder of a Hollywood actor, you will find that your story is not getting that much of views as the report of that, the murder of a Hollywood actor is getting. So this is, where the competition between the prominent figures and the obscure figures. So by obscure figures means who are not that popular, right? So these gatekeepers, they also look at all these things. You may argue with me, okay, you may have your own debate that covering a murder incident of a general people, don't they have a news value? I agree with you when if you say that, okay, why don't they have value? Yeah, even I ask that. They also have value. So they must be reported. That incident must be reported. But these are the factors that these gatekeepers are considering, right? Because they have to, as at the very beginning of this video, as I said, that there are three main news perspectives that these people look into. It's not only about keeping the readership or the viewership into mind, but it's also about the reporter's concern. It's more about the financial position. It's more about whether the news outlet, they can sell the news to the people or not, because it's about their financial existence. Okay, and that's why, or where these competition of what is news value and how it is considered to be selected or not comes in. Okay, and there are so many debates about that. So I'm only discussing about what actually comes out after all those debates and all those experiments and all those case studies being done in the past. After that, most of these gatekeepers are they have been considering all these concepts as the news values. Okay, whether you agree or not, that depends upon you. You may have your own argument. This is one more concept which is about conflict. They also try to look at whether a particular news has a property of conflict or not. So by conflict, it doesn't mean that it creates a conflict between the two parties. It's about they try to measure whether that news value can uh, have the very natural tendency to bring two people face to face. For example, say if your news is about you are making a news out of the statement being given by a Democrats. So when you do that, not only the Democrats readers or people who support the Democrats, they will read that or they will view that news. In fact, the Republicans will also look at that. So there are some news, even if you do not look at the face value of that news, that it is only one side of the story, but that story actually has the another side also, and which is very hidden. Okay, and these gates I mean these Mr. Gates or these gatekeepers, they look into all those, they try to find out whether a particular news value has that property or not, because that will bring into more viewership and more readership. It's also about currency. Any news which is very much related to the currency, which is very much related to the economy of the country, or of the business corporations running in your country, or say the economic status of all general commodities which are used by the people in general for living their life, this will get more attention to the people, right? So news of, for example, say news of price hike in gas, petrol, drugs, etc., they have direct influence to the maximum of the people. So the very economic, whether that news or story that you have selected has the economic influence upon it, economic influence upon the people or not, whether that has that influencing property from the field of economics, you also look at that, or these gatekeepers, they also look at that in order while selecting the news for the next day. Sometimes you'll find that some news are so bizarre. Okay, so bizarre means they don't have any sense, but they make news. For example, say Bermuda Triangle, the very unsolved mystery. People are very much they are very much curious about knowing, even if that report may not give you any answer to or any solution, or even if that still remain unresolved, right? People will go and look at that report. Unidentified flying objects, reporting some unidentified reports on all these things, or say very unexpected kind of things like dog riding a tricycle. So these are some of the bizarre issues that actually attract your readership or viewership, and these are also some of the properties that uh, are considered to be the news value. So it's very surprising and it's very unfortunate that which do not have anything to do with the life of the people, which is not, I believe, that people need to know about. They are also taking the place of news these days, right? So it's up on you now, right? What's your argument? What do you think about uh, all these concepts? So I hope you will post your comment, or if you have any query, you can put those questions, send to me through an email. Thank you so much. I hope this video will help you. I'll come up with the next video talking on different issues. Thank you.